The moment I stepped through the doors, they saw me. My stepmother's smile tightened. My father's jaw clenched. And Brandon, he smirked, like I'd just wandered in from a failed life. "Look what the wind dragged back," Linda muttered loud enough for the staff to hear. I hadn't been home in 7 years, not since the day my father told me I was no longer part of this family. For choosing federal service over his carefully curated corporate legacy. Now, here I was, standing in the marble entryway of the Carter estate, dressed in black, holding nothing but a small clutch that contained my NSA credentials and a letter of federal assignment. But they didn't ask why I'd returned. They didn't ask how I'd been. They handed me a tray of champagne flutes. "Since you're here," Linda said flatly, "make yourself useful." And I smiled because they had no idea what was coming. The tray was heavier than it looked, not because of the crystal or the weight of the champagne, but because of the eyes, dozens of them watching, measuring, whispering behind perfect teeth and cocktail napkins. Some curious, some amused, some smug, already writing the punchline in their heads. I hadn't stepped inside the Carter estate since I was 23. Back then, I was the golden child, valedictorian, debate team captain, early admission to Wharton, the daughter they paraded through country clubs like a prized heirloom. Back then, they called me brilliant. That ended the day I told my father I was turning down his meticulously mapped MBA pipeline to accept a classified role in federal cyber intelligence. The silence was instant, the shame unforgiving. By nightfall, I was packing my bags. By morning, the locks were changed. So yes, holding a tray tonight was poetic. "Keep your shoulders back," Linda whispered as she brushed past me. "At least try to look like you haven't completely wasted your potential." I didn't answer. I didn't have to. I had nothing to prove to her anymore. The guests filtered in slowly. Men in crisp suits with polished cufflinks. Women in gowns that shimmered like judgment under the chandeliers. They circled the model of Carter Tech's new joint defense project displayed like a prize in the center of the grand hall. Brandon stood beside it, 30 handsome, in a way that bored me, playing the role he'd rehearsed since birth. Heir to the empire, groomed by our father, fed power like it was his birthright. Tonight he was being introduced to investors as the future of the company, as if that future didn't depend on a contract I had the power to kill. "Excuse me." Miss A man in a tux waved an empty flute like I was a vending machine. I took it, replaced it, smiled. He didn't recognize me. Most didn't. But the ones who did, the family friends, the board members, the old professors who once praised my potential, they didn't offer hugs, just whispers. "She joined the government or something, right? I heard she flunked out of grad school." "No, I think she went off-grid. You know, conspiracy types." I walked past the dining room where 3 of my aunts stood like a Greek chorus. "At least she's dressed modestly," one said. "She always was the serious one," another added, like that was a sin. "Poor Charles," they sighed. "So much potential. Just wasted." I let it roll off me like static. I wasn't here for their approval. I was here for the audit. The Carteret-Blackstone Global Partnership was one of the largest active cyber defense contracts on record, and I, under a classified code name, had been reviewing their system architecture for 3 months. Tonight was a surprise inspection. Normally I'd walk in with a badge and a federal team, but not this time. This time I wanted to see how they behaved when they thought I was nothing. Then the air shifted. A tall man entered. Gray suit, military posture, sharp eyes that cut through the noise like a scalpel. Richard Baines, CEO of Blackstone Global. My father lit up like a light bulb on cue. "Richard," he beamed. "Let me introduce my son, Brandon Carter, lead strategist on the Aegis interface." Baines nodded politely, shaking Brandon's hand. "I've heard the name. looking forward to the presentation. Then his eyes shifted, across the room, to me. His gaze narrowed, then recognition, a slow disbelieving smile, and then he walked toward me, past my father, past the investors, past the cocktail waiters. "Agent Carter," he said, his voice calm, respectful. "Didn't realize you'd be here in person." Linda stiffened beside me. My father blinked like someone had rewritten the script he'd spent years perfecting. "Richard," he said slowly, "did you just say Agent Baines extended his hand not to take the tray, to shake mine?" "I've read your briefings," he said. "Your work on the Geneva Breach Protocol was brilliant. Your counter honeypot model inspired a few changes on our end." I smiled calmly. "Appreciate that, sir. I thought I'd make an in-person appearance before tomorrow's audit. Consider it a surprise inspection." He laughed warmly. "A damn effective one." By now the room had gone silent. Someone dropped a fork. My father's face contorted from pride to confusion to horror. "Jade," he whispered, "you're the federal agent." "Yes," I said, handing the tray to a staffer. "Technically, I'm the one deciding whether Carter Tech moves forward with this contract." I stepped forward, not behind the tray, not beneath their shame, but where I'd always belonged, eye level, unflinching, undeniable. Game on. They didn't speak to me for the rest of the night. Not my father, not Linda, not Brandon. After Richard Baines called me Agent Carter, it was like a silence grenade had gone off in the center of the Carter estate. People whispered. They stared. Some looked impressed. Others terrified. I didn't mind. Fear, I'd learned, is often more useful than approval. I drifted from the guests and stood quietly by the fireplace, letting the quartet's string music hum over the pounding in my chest. I should have felt triumphant, vindicated, but instead I felt a scar reopen. If you walk away from this Jade, you're no longer my daughter. I was 23 when he said it, the night I chose the NSA over Carter Tech. Graduated top of my class in applied mathematics, 3 Fortune 500 internships, 2 Ivy League MBA acceptances, a fast track to a life mapped out by Charles Carter himself. But when I got that letter, NSA Recruitment Federal Cyber Ops, I knew. I wanted purpose, not promotion. He saw it as betrayal. I remember sitting at the dinner table trying to explain. "I'm not running from responsibility," I told him. "I'm running toward impact." He laughed, mean and quiet. "You want to be a spy in a basement? That's pathetic. It's for people who can't make it in the real world." Linda joined in like she always did when she sensed blood. "She's just doing this for attention. Maybe if we hadn't praised Brandon so much, she wouldn't be sabotaging herself." That night they didn't yell. They cut. With silence, with smirks. With that cold final line, "You want to work for shadow people. Then be one. Get out. And don't come back." I packed everything into 2 suitcases, slept at the airport, moved into a 1-bedroom above a laundromat in D.C., where the ceiling leaked and the stove sparked when I boiled water. But I didn't complain. I took night shifts, cleared security clearances, built systems that stopped real threats. I learned how to work without applause, how to serve in silence, and I never looked back. Until tonight. A soft voice broke through my thoughts. "Agent Carter." I turned. A junior engineer, early 30s, too nervous, smile tie slightly askew. I just wanted to say, "Your paper on adaptive intrusion monitoring changed how we structure our red zone protocols." I blinked, then smiled, glad it helped. He nodded and disappeared quickly, like he wasn't sure if he was allowed to talk to me. I appreciated it more than I let on. Just then I smelled Brandon's cologne before I saw him. He strolled up with that half-smile somewhere between charm and panic. So he said, "You're the one holding our future in her hands." I said nothing. He smirked wider. "Funny. For someone so desperate not to be part of this family, you seem awfully comfortable being the one who might destroy it. There's a difference between destruction and accountability, I said. Oh, come on, he scoffed. This is personal. You've always had something to prove. No, I said calmly. I've just always refused to prove it to the wrong people. His smile twitched. I worked my ass off for this company, he said low and sharp. Dad didn't just hand it to me. I didn't bother listing the 5-figure allowance, the tailor-made internships, the fast-tracked promotions. Instead, I just said, I hope you did work hard, because starting tomorrow, I'm going to audit every line of code you signed off on. He flinched like I'd slapped him. This contract, I continued, involves national infrastructure, homeland security, lives. It's not a family vanity project, Brandon. It's not a playground. If I find even one intentional vulnerability, the deal is off, and you'll be lucky if your name stays on the door. He looked at me like he was seeing me for the first time, not as the sister he outshined, but as someone who had eclipsed him completely. So this is revenge. No, I said softly. This is responsibility, something you've never had to carry until now. And I walked away. I didn't look back, because the moment he called it revenge, I knew he didn't get it. This wasn't about settling a score. This was about making sure no one else paid for his shortcuts, because unlike him, I didn't inherit power. I earned it. I arrived at Carter Tech at 7:48 a.m. No grand entrance, no security convoy, just a federal vehicle with blackout windows, my NSA laptop bag, and a badge that made receptionists stand up a little straighter. Good morning, Agent Carter, the front gate guard said, scanning my ID. Just Jade, I replied. Let's keep it simple. The building was all glass and steel, gleaming ambition in every inch. Cold, expensive, perfectly hollow. Like the people who once told me I had no place here. I walked past the lobby where Brandon used to boast about future takeovers, through the glass atrium, where I once sat for career day watching my father talk about legacy, like it was a family heirloom instead of a leash. I'm here to begin the audit, I told the receptionist. She blinked, almost stammering. Do you want someone from the executive team to brief you? I smiled without warmth. They'll catch up. Floor 12. System security infrastructure. The heartbeat of Carter Tech's newest defense system, the exact interface that Brandon had fast-tracked for deployment. The exact one I was about to take apart. A young engineer named Milo met me at the server room. You're her, he said, eyes wide. I'm me, I replied. And you're Milo, endpoint containment lead. He nodded nervously. Yes. Good. Walk me through your structure from base layer to red zone shielding. I want to see where the segmentation breaks under brute force or behavioral triggers. He blinked. Breaks. There's no such thing as flawless code, I said. Only code that hasn't been tested hard enough. Milo swallowed hard. Right. He led me into the mainframe control center, row after row of terminal stations, hums of low-frequency cooling systems, walls of code screens, glowing in silence. I could feel the nervous energy shift around me like static. His explanations were competent, but not confident. Who built this schema, I asked, pointing at the core access protocols. Not me, he admitted. Most of it was pushed from executive-level templates. Brandon wanted it deployed fast to meet the partnership launch. I stared at the screen. He fast-tracked the encryption layers without final red team testing. So you deployed a critical cyber defense infrastructure, I said slowly, with placeholder shielding. I wasn't supposed to say that, he muttered. You just did. I sat down at the nearest terminal, pulled out my encrypted drive, and opened a local sandbox. Milo, I said without looking up, I need all code commit logs from the last 4 weeks, and access to internal routing sandbox logs. Now. Yes, agent. And one more thing, Brandon Carter's admin credentials. He froze. You want me to block the CEO? I finally turned to him. I want you to follow federal security compliance protocols, which state no executive override access during an active government audit. He swallowed again. Yes, ma'am. By 10:12 a.m., I had found 3 red-level vulnerabilities, unsecured API routes that allowed direct access to core layers without throttling, obsolete packet filters that could be bypassed with minimal signature modulation, and worst of all, timestamp deletion inconsistencies in the sandbox logs. Not an error, not negligence, a deliberate gap. Each of those alone could trigger Pentagon-level scrutiny. All 3 combined grounds for immediate suspension of contract. I opened a private file, CTFID, Aegis Liaison Review Omega. This wasn't just about Carter Tech anymore. This was about national systems, civilian safety, homeland protection, the kind of responsibility Brandon couldn't even spell, let alone carry. An hour later, the server room doors hissed open. I didn't turn. I didn't have to. I see you've made yourself comfortable, Brandon's voice said behind me. I kept typing. You made it easy. He walked closer. You locked me out of my own system. I followed audit protocol, I said. You'd know that if you'd read the compliance forms you signed. You're not really going to tank this deal over a few bugs, are you? I turned in my chair. Brandon, this isn't about bugs. It's about an infrastructure you pushed live without proper segmentation, without final round testing with active vulnerabilities in a defense-adjacent system. He blinked. You handed a live weapon to a military partner and hoped no one pulled the trigger. That's dramatic. No, that's forensic. He paced. Look, I made aggressive calls. That's what leaders do. No system's perfect. So audit it, flag it, patch it. But don't bury us. I stared at him, and for just a moment I saw it. The panic behind the smirk, the fear that maybe, just maybe, he wasn't ready, that maybe Daddy's plan had gone too far. I don't want to bury Carter Tech, I said quietly, but I won't let it bury a national system either. He looked at me, and for the first time since I came back, he had no answer. He left. And I went back to work, because unlike them, I wasn't here to save face. I was here to save something far more important. The conference room at Carter Tech was all glass, steel, and ego. 12 leather chairs, a mahogany table long enough to stage a war, every surface polished like a secret being hidden under gloss. I sat at the far end. No logo, no fanfare. Just a black blazer, a government badge, and a folder that could erase everything they built. No one offered me coffee. No one asked if I needed anything. They all knew who I was now. They just didn't know what I was going to do. And I liked that. Uncertainty is leverage. Brandon walked in 15 minutes late, flanked by 2 assistants who looked like they were already preparing their resumes. He scanned the room like a man trying to pretend he still owned it. He didn't. My father followed, immaculate, suit-stone face, jaw locked in quiet panic. He didn't look at me. He didn't have to. I could feel it in the air. You came back to humiliate us. No. I came back to protect something bigger than them. If humiliation happened along the way, so be it. Then came the shift. The only one in that room who didn't flinch when he walked in. Richard Baines, the CEO of Blackstone Global, took his seat, nodded to the room, then looked directly at me. Agent Carter, he said clearly. Good to see you again. I trust your early findings are ready? I nodded once. They are. I'll present my preliminary audit report after the Carter-Rec demonstration. My father's eyes widened slightly. You're speaking in this meeting, Baines raised a brow. She's the lead liaison, Charles. Full audit authority. You were informed. I just didn't realize she'd be powerful, respected, unmovable. But he didn't finish the sentence, because everyone in the room already had. Brandon stood at the screen. His hands moved like a magician rehearsing illusions. Slides flashed growth charts, interface models, military-adjacent simulations. He smiled. He pitched. He made eye contact with everyone but me. "Carteret is ready for Phase 1 of deployment," he said. "The Aegis interface will provide multi-layer encryption and dynamic infrastructure shielding aligned with Blackstone's global architecture." The board applauded politely, but the real presentation was about to begin. Baines turned to me. "Agent Carter, your findings." I stood. No slides, no animation, just a black screen with a government seal. "In the last 48 hours, I began. I conducted a Level Omega protocol review of Carter Tech's security systems. We analyzed firewall integrity, endpoint segmentation, sandbox continuity, and infrastructure resiliency under duress simulations." I paused. "In that time, we identified 3 red-level vulnerabilities. Any one of them would be grounds for disqualification from federal defense contracts. All 3 combined represent a catastrophic failure in executive oversight." Silence. Slide 1. Unthrottled access pipeline. Breach time 14.3 seconds. Slide 2. Obsolete packet inspection. Failure rate 61%. Slide 3. Sandbox log tampering. Forensic traceability 0%. These vulnerabilities, I continued, could allow a mid-level adversary to compromise national defense systems, not a foreign power. A sophomore computer science student with enough time and caffeine. Someone swore under their breath. Brandon's jaw flexed. I clicked again. Slide 4. Admin override log. Time-stamped to Brandon Carter. Brandon stood. "That's not what it looks like. You disabled safety protocols to expedite deployment. I expedited integration. You greenlit a vulnerable prototype in a military-adjacent system. He was losing control, and the room knew it." Baines folded his arms. "Agent Carter, your recommendation. Immediate suspension of interface deployment," I said, "with independent third-party validation and executive role restructuring. Effective today." My father stood up. "Richard, let's not be rash." "We can fix this," Baines raised a hand. "This isn't a negotiation, Charles." Then he turned to me. "I've implemented your Geneva countermeasures. They work. If you say this system isn't ready, then it's not ready." He nodded once. "Your recommendation stands." The meeting dissolved like a storm cloud. Chairs scraped, papers shuffled, people scattered. Only 3 remained. Me, Brandon, my father. Charles Carter looked at me across the table, not like a father seeing his child, like a man realizing his blueprint had failed to account for one thing. Me. You're. This powerful, I didn't smile. I didn't come back to be powerful, Dad. I came back to protect what matters, even if that means protecting it. From you. And then I walked out. The study hadn't changed. Second floor, left hallway, brass lion handle. As a kid, I used to think it guarded something sacred. Now I knew it only guarded silence, the kind that ferments over decades and calls itself peace. I didn't knock. My father looked up from the leather armchair posture, rigid glass in hand. Linda sat opposite him, legs crossed, wine swirling dangerously despite it being barely noon. Brandon wasn't there, exactly how I wanted it. "Close the door," my father said. I did. Tick, tick, tick. The grandfather clock behind him filled the void, counting down the seconds until one of us detonated. He finally broke the silence. "You embarrassed me, Jade." "No," I said. "You embarrassed yourself." "I just turned on the lights," Linda scoffed. "You think this is justice, humiliating your own brother after everything we gave you?" I laughed. Not bitter, not joyful, just that strange sound that comes from old scars being touched with the same fingers that made them. "You gave me conditions, not love. There's a difference." My father stood slowly. His voice didn't rise, but it sharpened like glass. You were the one who walked away. No, I replied, stepping closer. I was the one you pushed out because I wouldn't follow the blueprint, because I refused to be Brandon's shadow, because I said no to a life you designed not for me, but for your pride. Linda rose now, too. You were always dramatic, always had to prove you were special. You mean I didn't want to be obedient? I asked. She stepped forward. You think you're better than us now because some CEO praised your little tech project. I turned fully to face her. You mean the National Encryption Directive that protected critical systems during the Atlantic breach? That project, she blinked. Her mouth opened, then closed. My father sat back down, suddenly older. I never hated your intelligence, he muttered. I just hated how you used it to drift away. That stopped me for a beat. Then I said softly, I didn't drift. You pushed. He didn't argue. He didn't deny it. Because it was the first true thing he'd said in years. I never wanted to leave this family, I added, but I wasn't going to shrink to fit the picture you framed for me. He stared down at his hands. Brandon wasn't ready, he admitted. And now the world knows. Then maybe the world deserved to. Linda's silence was louder now. Brittle. No more whine, no more words. I turned toward the door, paused. There's something else, I said. My father looked up. I'm recommending Brandon be removed as project lead. His brows shot up. You want us to fire him? No, replace him. Not with me, I'm not staying, but with someone who earned it. Because right now your legacy is hanging by a thread. His voice cracked. And what about you? What do you want? I looked at him, and for once I didn't hesitate. I wanted a father who believed in who I was, not who he planned. Then I left the room, not storming out, not with anger, just done. I walked out of Carter Tech like a ghost stepping out of its old house. The walls didn't cry. The doors didn't close behind me. They simply let me go. The sun was slipping behind the glass towers as I crossed the parking lot. Wind colder now, cleaner. I'd been breathing stale air around them for too long. I reached my car, hand on the door handle, when I heard him. Running back to D.C., already Brandon, no jacket, sleeves rolled up, like he still thought he was the protagonist in someone's story. I'm not running, I said, unlocking the door. But I'm done here. He leaned against the next car, arms crossed, eyes twitching with something that wasn't quite anger anymore. You really think I never tried? He asked. I blinked. Tried to live up to him, Brandon said. To be what he wanted. You think he handed me this place on a silver platter? He laughed, but it was bitter. Tired. No. He handed me a blueprint I wasn't allowed to change. Every mistake I made he compared to you even after you were gone. I folded my arms, uncertain now. That's not what it looked like. Of course not. You were out there saving the world. I was in here trying not to break it. I didn't respond, because I didn't know if I could forgive him yet. But for the first time I saw him clearly. He wasn't the golden boy. He was the one trying not to drown in gold. Why didn't you say something? I asked. Because if I admitted I wasn't ready, he'd see me as weak. And if I admitted you were better, he'd cut me out. He looked at me then, really looked. You loved this place too, didn't you? I did, I whispered, before they made me choose between it and myself. Silence stretched again, but this time it didn't sting. Are you going to report me for the override? He asked. No, I said. The report includes it, but I didn't request criminal referral, just oversight, and your removal as lead. He looked surprised. I'm not here to destroy you, I added, but I won't protect your shortcuts either. He nodded once, slowly. Then maybe it's time I stopped taking them. I opened the car door. Don't waste the second chance, Brandon, I said. You won't get a third." He didn't argue, didn't follow, just stood there. And for the first time in years, he looked like a man who finally stopped pretending. The flight back to D.C. was short, but the silence, that felt longer. I didn't replay the boardroom showdown. I didn't think about my father's hollow stare or Brandon's half-confession in the parking lot. Instead, I kept circling one truth: how close I had come to becoming like them. The power, the pride, the silence. It's a slow thing becoming what you swore you'd never be, until someone calls you Agent Carter and you forget what your own name sounds like without a title. My phone buzzed as the plane descended. Richard Baines would like to meet privately. 5:00 p.m. M Street office, confidential. By 4:55, I was sitting in a glass-walled executive suite overlooking the Federal Complex skyline. Sunlight slipped between buildings like something trying to escape. Baines sat across from me, jacket off, tie loosened, 2 cups of tea, not coffee. Intentional. "Thanks for coming," he said. "You said confidential." He smiled. "Always, but especially for you." I raised an eyebrow. He leaned forward. "Let me ask you something. Do you remember your first publication, the paper on decentralized response firewalls?" I blinked. "That was from grad school. I wasn't even cleared yet." "I read it," he said. "Twice." I tilted my head. "Why?" "Because it wasn't written to impress. It was written to protect." He sipped his tea. Quiet. "Then your father is a brilliant strategist. Your brother ambitious. But you," he paused, "you're a guardian. You don't speak to be heard. You speak to hold the structure, even if no one thanks you." I didn't answer. Not because I didn't want to, but because no one had ever seen it like that before. "You pulled my name for the audit," I said slowly. He nodded. "When I saw Carter Tech on the partnership list, I knew we'd need a clean hand, someone with no strings left in that building, someone who didn't owe anyone a damn thing. And still came back," I said. He smiled. "That's why it worked. For a moment, I didn't feel like a ghost of the golden child. I felt like me. Jade, not agent, not prodigy, just the woman who showed up when the system needed her most." "What happens now?" I asked. "You file your final report. Someone else implements your recommendations. Brandon either rises or folds. Your family is beyond my jurisdiction." He stood and extended his hand. I took it. Then he said one more thing. "You didn't come back for revenge. That's why you won." I unpacked slowly. Not because I had much, just 2 suitcases and a laptop bag, but because for the first time in years I wasn't in a rush to prove anything. The studio was small, Georgetown view, a couch with one fraying corner. Books lined the shelf like quiet companions. I brewed chamomile tea and stood on the balcony watching the street below. The city shimmered soft, understated. Unlike the Carter estate, these lights didn't scream for attention. They whispered, and I listened. 4 days since the audit. 3 since I filed the final report. 2 since I deleted the last voicemail from my father, a message that started with anger and ended in silence. 1 day since I realized I wasn't angry anymore. That night I made dinner, just for myself. No crystal glasses, no banquet tables, just pasta with basil, a glass of red, and Miles Davis playing low from my phone. Halfway through the meal, someone knocked. I wasn't expecting anyone. I never expected anyone. I opened the door cautiously. A young woman stood there, maybe 22, dark-rimmed glasses, a government ID badge around her neck, a manila folder clutched to her chest like a shield. "Agent Carter?" she asked. I smiled. "Technically, yes, but it's just Jade here." She flushed. "Sorry. I'm from the DC Cybersecurity Fellowship. They told me to deliver this personally." I took the folder. Inside, a formal letter of invitation. We would be honored if you would serve as a lead mentor and program designer for our National Youth Encryption Initiative. I read the first paragraph, then the second, and I laughed gently. Is it not the right time? She asked nervously. No, I said. It's perfect. I just didn't expect to be seen this way. So soon. Her shoulders relaxed. I read your Geneva paper, she said. It's why I joined the field. You made me feel like people like us belonged. That hit harder than I expected. Not because it was flattery, but because I saw myself in her. The way she held that folder like armor. The way she stood in a doorway unsure if she was welcome. I stepped aside. Come in. You shouldn't be walking around D.C. with classified mail and no tea. She smiled, and for the next hour the apartment filled with something I hadn't felt in years. Possibility. When she left, I returned to the balcony. No fanfare, no applause, just breath and space. I thought about Brandon, whether he'd rise or retreat. My father, whether he was finally learning that love cannot be conditional and still be called love. Linda. Only for a moment. Then I picked up the pen on my side table and opened a blank page in my journal. At the top I wrote, I did not come back to reclaim the house. I came back to reclaim myself, and I did. Then I closed the book. Tomorrow there would be new work, new minds to mentor, new systems to protect. But tonight I let myself be still. No codes, no titles, just Jade. Have you ever walked away from a life that was never truly yours? Have you ever returned not to prove yourself but to protect something bigger than ego? Drop your story in the comments. And if you've ever been told you were too serious, too much, or too different, just remember you don't owe them comfort. You owe yourself truth. Like, share, and never shrink to fit someone else's legacy.